So I hope that it's not news to you that our car commuting, desk-bound jobs, home computer habits, and TV watching sedentary lifestyles perhaps are not so healthy for us. What you may not know is sitting is the new smoking. All this sitting has been linked to increased risk of heart disease, diabetes, cancer, and depression. In fact, it's now been labeled the sitting disease, this epidemic. So in your handout on the second page, there's this diagram, and it's impossible to read any of the writing. It's tiny. I don't care how far away you get it. So on the next page, I've typed it all out so you can actually see what it is exactly that goes wrong in our bodies when we park ourselves for 8 hours a day, which is about average for a US adult these days. Heart disease, number one item on the list. Muscles burn less fat and blood flows more sluggishly during a long sit, which allows fatty acids to more easily clog the heart. Prolonged sitting has been linked to high blood pressure and elevated cholesterol. The more sedentary time, the more likely you are to develop cardiovascular disease. It's pretty straightforward. We can have an overproductive pancreas. The pancreas produces insulin, a hormone that carries glucose to cells for energy. Cells in idle muscles, those sitting, don't respond as readily to insulin, so that makes the pancreas pump out more and more insulin, which can lead to diabetes and other diseases. A study in 2011 found a decline in insulin response after only 1 day of prolonged sitting. Cancer. Sitting is linked to a greater risk for colon, breast, and endometrial cancers. The reasons are not totally clear. One theory is that excess insulin encourages cell growth. Too much growth is like cancer. Another theory is that the regular movement, if you're not sitting all day, boosts your natural antioxidants, which can kill cell-damaging free radicals. Who wants mushy abs and limp glutes? Raise your hands. It's a real easy way to get it. Just sit all day. When you stand, move, or even sit up straight, abdominal muscles help keep you upright. But when you slump in a chair, they go unused. Back muscles and wimpy abs form a posture-wrecking alliance that can exaggerate the spine's natural arch. We call that sway back. You can certainly get tight hips from sitting too much right here in the front. When your leg is flexed all day, these muscles shorten. Hip flexors, if they're tight, so chronic sitters rarely extend these. They rarely stand up and extend that muscle, so it gets shortened over time. And these chronic sitters have shorter stride length, and some studies have found that decreased hip mobility is a main reason elderly people tend to fall. Here's our favorite, limp glutes. Sitting requires your glutes to do absolutely nothing, and they get used to it. They prefer it. Soft glutes limit your stability, your ability to push off and gait, and your ability to maintain a powerful stride. We can, of course, get leg disorders from sitting. Poor circulation would be just okay, my ankles are swollen, no big deal, I can handle that. And then we get to varicose veins, and then if we keep having a problem with sitting too much, we can actually get dangerous blood clots or DVTs. You can get soft bones from sitting, just from not weight bearing. On the legs, like walking and running, this stimulates the bone density in your hips and your lower body bones. Lifting weights can do the same thing for you in your upper body, can increase the strength and density in your bones. Scientists partially attribute increased cases of osteoporosis to lack of activity. We're going to talk in a minute more about the mortality of sitting and TV watching, so we'll skip that for the moment. But trouble at the top. We can get foggy brain from sitting too much. So moving muscles pump fresh blood and oxygen through the brain and trigger the release of all sorts of brain and mood-enhancing chemicals. When we sit for a long time, everything slows down, including brain function. We can, of course, get a strained neck, especially if you're sitting a lot, straining, looking towards your computer screen, or typing, or heaven forbid, you're still holding your phone between your ear and your shoulder. Please stop if you're doing that. Okay, the neck does not slouch alone. If we're slouching and straining the neck, we're also going to slump forward and overextend the muscles in the upper back and then the central back as well. And then we come down to the whole spine becoming inflexible. Spines that don't move become inflexible and susceptible to damage even during a mundane activity like reaching for your coffee cup or bending forward to tie the shoe. When we do move around, soft discs between the vertebrae expand and contract like sponges. When we sit for long periods, discs are squashed, and they get squashed unevenly. They lose their sponginess. We can even have collagen hardening around the supporting tendons and ligaments. Disc damage. People who sit more are at a much greater risk for herniated discs. People who already have a disc problem, the absolute worst thing you can do is sit. I encourage people when they come in to me and they have a herniated disc, avoid sitting at all costs. All day, stand as much as you possibly can. So the evidence that I have to present is pretty current. There was a New York Times article a month ago talking about how past studies have shown that the more hours people spend sitting, the more likely they are to develop diabetes, heart disease, and to potentially die prematurely. There's a growing body of new evidence that seems to be confirming this. There's a handout. If you came in late, there's a handout in the second row there on the end. So back to our PowerPoint. For more current, up-to-date research, there's a gene that's been discovered that helps prevent blood clotting and inflammation to keep your cardiovascular system healthy. It's got this really nice long name, so let's call it LPP1. It's significantly suppressed when you sit for just a few hours, so we're losing the benefits of the anti-inflammatory components of this gene. And the shocker, unfortunately, is that it's not impacted by exercise. If you exercise for a small amount of time and then you sit the rest of the day, that's not enough to boost this gene's activity. The American Cancer Society has done a pretty impressive, very long-term study. They started in 1982. The data so far, it runs through 2006. They've compiled it. There were 1.2 million American men and women recruited for this study. That's pretty impressive. And over that many number of years, they filled out extensive confidential questionnaires about height, weight, demographics, personal and family medical history, their use of medications, vitamins, their reproductive history, occupational exposure, diet, alcohol, tobacco use, exercise, and behavior habits. That's pretty intense questionnaire. And they've managed to follow all these people. 99% of them, they've gotten data on the deaths of almost everybody out of this 1.2 million. Okay, so what did they find? Sitting for more than 6 hours a day elevates your chances of dying from cancer and other major diseases, even if you maintain a healthy weight and don't smoke. Did that sink in? That's big. Okay, so women specifically who sat more than 6 hours a day faced a 37% greater risk of death compared to those who sat less than 3 hours a day. The person with no regular exercise and sitting more than 6 hours a day, of the people in this study, 1.2 million though, had a 94% increased mortality risk. Wow, it's sitting. Back to the evils of TV. So there's this little graph I pulled off of the infographic at the beginning that you can't read very well. And so this is specifically TV is worse than any other kind of sitting because you're the least active. Even at the computer, your brain is working and maybe your arm is using a mouse, something. So people who watched the most TV in an 8.5-year study, which was more than 7 hours, had a 61% greater risk of dying than those who watched less than 1 hour per day. Pretty scary statistics. The Australians have done a TV watching study. Began in 1999. They asked more than 11,000 people over the age of 25 about their weekly TV viewing, and they compared, again, viewing time with mortality rates. So these people consolidated their data into two pretty frightening, impressive statements that every hour of TV that was watched equaled 22 minutes off of the life expectancy. More than 6 hours of TV per day took almost 5 years off of their life. Is the voice really worth that? No. Thank you. I've never seen it, but I keep hearing people talk about it. Okay, so more evidence. Again, really recent, September 2014, a month ago, telomeres. So scientists in Sweden have studied the effects of sitting and exercise on telomeres. What's a telomere? Well, there's a little diagram at the bottom. The little orange caps are your telomeres. So these are just caps on the ends of the DNA strands in cells which shorten and fray as cells age. Obesity and illness can shorten and fray the telomeres as well. And some evidence suggests that healthy living preserves these telomeres. So they're just kind of an indicator for cell aging. And so they took a group of sedentary overweight men and women. They were all aged 68. Half of the group began a moderate exercise program designed to improve their general health, and they were encouraged, just try not to sit as much, just kind of suggested that to them. The other half of the group were told to continue with their normal lives, but try to lose weight, try to be healthy. They weren't given any specifics on how to do that. And they did a blood test on these people before, and then 6 months later, plus a questionnaire so they could see how much they really had been sitting. The exercise group, this was 6 months later, the telomeres in those sitting less had actually lengthened. You're growing younger just by not sitting. It's in the blood, it's pretty definitive test here. The control group, they were not sitting less just because they had not been recommended to sit less. Their telomeres were shorter. This is just in 6 months of sitting. They're seeing a difference at the cellular level. The kicker is that those who exercised the most out of either group did not always have longer telomeres. The only direct correlation was the sitting that they found in the questionnaire. But I'm a runner, you say. You don't have to worry about the harms of sedentary living because you're active, right? Up until recently, if you exercise for the guideline of an hour a day, you were healthy and you don't have to really worry about anything. You think you're doing great. But now there's a consistent body of emerging research suggesting it's entirely possible to meet the current physical activity guidelines while still being incredibly sedentary. And all this sitting increases your risk of many diseases and premature death. So sitting is like smoking. It's bad for you even if you get exercise. More research again, although I don't want to poo-poo running. Running is good, exercise is good, but if you go for a run in the morning and then the rest of your waking hours is sitting, you're really losing. Your health benefits are really depreciating significantly from that workout effort. The Canadians, they're all good about this research stuff. They took 17,000 people in their study in a 12-year span. They found the more time people spent sitting, the earlier they died, regardless of age, body weight, or how much they exercised. Pretty crazy. I want to introduce you to a new topic called NEAT. It stands for Non-Exercise Activity Thermogenesis. Aren't you glad we're just going to call it NEAT? Yeah. So NEAT is everything that you do that's not sleeping, eating, or formal exercise. So formal exercise is, I went to the gym, I worked out, I went for a run, I'm training for a race, something like that. That makes sense to us, but what we don't maybe think about is NEAT is folding laundry, especially if you're standing. It's shopping, online doesn't count. Walking the flight of stairs, park at the far end of the parking lot and just walk into the store. Even standing or fidgeting is included in NEAT. So we're going to get to know NEAT a little closer here. We're backing out to see where it fits in to your daily energy expenditure. There's 3 components. The first one is your basal metabolic rate. That's pretty standard for body size. It accounts for about 60% of your daily energy expenditure. Think calories when I say energy expenditure. So the second component of that is thermal effect of food, which accounts for about 10% of your daily energy expenditure. This has very low variability among individuals. I do not recommend this method for weight control. I'm going to eat more so that I get more thermal effect from the food digestion. No, that doesn't really work. Okay, what you can change is your activity thermogenesis, which is composed of the formal exercise or the NEAT. Those two combined make that remaining 30%. NEAT is very variable, hugely variable. The vast majority of the world's population does not participate in formal exercise, even though we all know we should. Those that do, it's pretty disappointing in how many calories we actually burn in a formal run or gym workout. Those machines lie to you. They're not very accurate on the calorie count, unfortunately. So NEAT explains why an active person, someone doing a lot of NEAT, can expend 2,000 calories a day more than an inactive person of the same size. 2 kinds of NEAT. There's occupational and leisure. So occupational NEAT obviously depends on what kind of job you have, but we have control over the leisure NEAT, what you do outside of work in the evenings, the morning before work, or the weekends. There's a huge variability in occupational NEAT, as you can imagine. Some people are stuck at a desk. They're the telemarketers. They probably have a urinal, so they don't have to get up. I don't know, the catheter, right? Something up to the most strenuous, farming, construction. So there can be 1,000-calorie difference between extremes in job type. And you think, well, I don't really have much control over that. We might have a little more control than we think, but there is much more control in our leisure NEAT. We have choices. What we do in the evening, your calorie burn can range from 30 calories watching TV, and that depends on what you're eating while you're watching TV, up to 600 calories with more energetic pursuits like gardening. Just simply start cooking instead of takeout. You'll spend time standing, teach your kids to cook, learn to dance, do something different than sitting in front of the TV, because we just learned how scary that can be. NEAT correlates directly to obesity. There's a guy named Dr. Levine who is from the Mayo Clinic at Rochester, and he's done a lot of studies on NEAT specifically, and he's written a book called Get Up, Why Your Chair is Killing You and What You Can Do About It. That title is in your handout. He's kind of got some impressive quotes that I couldn't resist including in the talk. Those individuals who are lean are up and walking about 2.25 more hours a day than those who are obese. And although those extra couple of hours may contain a relatively small amount of movement, they have a huge impact on your health. Low NEAT is linked to obesity, diabetes, heart attacks, cancer, premature death. Sitting is more dangerous than smoking, kills more people than HIV. We are sitting ourselves to death, according to Dr. Levine. Now let's think back about these two hypothetical people. Who do you think is healthier? Did you change your mind? Now these are very hypothetical people. We don't have them filling out the big lengthy questionnaire. I don't know how many frappuccinos she's sampling during her work, and I don't know how much she's eating of her gourmet cooking, but she is not sitting very much. And my point was just to make you realize that this person at first glance looks super healthy, but their knitting and Netflix added to their computer desk work, depending on how they choose to get up and change that factor. We don't really know who's healthier, but maybe you're looking at these people a little bit differently now. So are you scared straight out of your chair? No, you're still sitting. Oh my gosh. Everywhere we go, there's chairs. So we need to kind of change the culture. Do not leave here feeling hopeless because you have a desk job. Leave here today motivated by your new insight into how dangerous sitting can be, and by the knowledge that there are many, many small, very simple things that you can do every day to make a big impact on your health. One side note, standing doesn't count. Standing is good. It doesn't count as sitting, so simply stand up more. I've come up with some ideas. Maybe you guys can come up with more. This list is in your handout. You can stand when you talk on the phone. It can be done. You can stand when you're at meetings. Change the culture. Everybody just sees a chair and they sit, even if they maybe don't need to. In waiting rooms, I did this the other day when I was developing this PowerPoint. I was waiting for some blood work. They were going to call me back, and all these chairs were there, and I was standing near a chair. And 3 people looked at me weird, and one of them I knew, and she goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm just waiting like you are." It was so funny because this is not what we see. We see chairs and we feel comfortable, but we've got to switch this whole routine. At the lab, there's a lot of options for standing workstations, people are telling me, my patients. Go for a lunch walk break. Get your friends to go with you. You might develop new friendships, you never know. Park at the end of the parking lot, it's not that hard. You can walk or bike for short errands. It's actually fun, unless it's a blizzard or icy. Take the stairs. Just because you see the elevator first, there's probably stairs right around the corner. They're not so scary. People are using pedometers. If you don't have one issued by the lab, they're cheap. Go get one, play with it, enjoy it. Find a motivation through the geeky data that you get. Sitting on an exercise ball, if you are required to sit, can increase your NEAT because you'll be fidgeting and you're working on your posture. I don't recommend sitting on one all day, but vary it. Drink more water at your desk so you have to go to the bathroom. Simple ideas that can make a huge impact. Keep a journal. You may not be aware of how much you're sitting or TV watching. You think, oh, I don't watch that much. Well, what about a Saturday during football season? Maybe. Let's make standing the new sitting. Anybody have questions? Yes.
What if you're reclining watching TV? Does that
Probably worse.
like if you're like half sleeping?
What were your thoughts on that?
Well, because you were saying when you were sitting, you were shortening, these ligaments in here.
Oh,
so.
yeah. So, yeah, that's not going to help that. If you really want to lengthen these ligaments, you could lay on your tummy on the floor and watch, and that would help specifically with the tight hip flexors.
So is that still as detrimental then?
Somebody asked me this when I was kind of telling them about my talk. They said, what if you're sitting on the floor instead of our standard chairs where you have to be a little more upright? And I don't know. I haven't found studies on it, but I would imagine the person that was asking me was more thinking like, cavemen didn't have a chair to sit in. They sat on the floor, maybe on the dirt. I would say that you're using a little bit more musculature if you're sitting on the floor, but depends on your body type whether or not that's tolerable for you. Stand. Just stand some. Don't watch TV. Did you see those numbers? Oh my gosh. Don't you value like 5 years of your life? Yeah, it creates this almost anxiety because you don't know why they're standing. Well, she probably has a back pain, That's the only reason anybody stands in a meeting, because they have a back issue, something like that. But if we start to slowly change the culture, and you can be the first person to start that in your own work environment, and you can change, we all do a little online surfing. Put your computer on a dresser or on the kitchen counter, stand while you're doing some surfing. Sit on the ball. Those exercise balls are like $20 at Target. Just 5.
$5 over at Cosmocita.
Oh, sweet. Even better. Get outside and go shopping instead of TV, But that's a good question, yeah. Anybody else? Thanks for listening.